Hello and welcome to the House of Hammer, or for this episode only, the House of Gavel, as were embodied in courtroom drama. Actually, that doesn't work because it's American judges who use gavels, not UK ones. In the UK, we use them in auction houses, so if this particular podcast was concerned with an episode of Bargain Hunt, where smuggled nylons were being auctioned off by eccentric tryhards to grumpy pensioners and weird loners, it would be apt. But it's not. So it isn't. Have I lost you yet? Well, clearly I'm not trying hard enough. The subject of this episode is Hammer's 1952 effort Never Look Back, which has been a popular title over the years. In fact, I count half a dozen different movies with the same title and a similar number of TV episodes. Let's have a look at a few of them. Why? Why not? And I'm in charge, so we're doing it. There's an episode of Lassie from 1967 titled Never Look Back, where Luther Jennings is being forced to retire from his job as a lookout at a fire station. Lassie and her friend, an older mixed-breed dog, I enjoy the fact that they feel the need to include that in the synopsis, try to cheer up the embittered man. You know, I really need to know how they do this. I hope it's some form of, puppet show. 1973's Never Look Back is a movie where Sean, as played by David Young, loses both his father and his uncle in plane crashes, which sounds quite unlucky, and therefore decides to fulfill his uncle's dream of, and I could give you all day and you'll never guess what his uncle's dream was, extracting jade from mountains. So, with a custom-made plane, Sean sets out for his impossible quest. I tell you what, consider my appetite whetted. I mean, not enough to watch it, obviously, but still. 1997's Never Look Back sees Jill leave her boyfriend, Keith, and head to Miami to try and make it in the modelling world. With advice and support from drag queens Billy and Mona, she makes it as a top international supermodel in only 7 weeks. Then, of course, Keith turns up to make trouble. Typical Keith. What a character. But we're not talking about any of those. Well, I mean, I just have been, but I'm stopping now. Stopping to talk about our Never Look Back, where Anne Maitland, played by Rosamund John, is a high-ranking British barrister with a promising career ahead of her. And before we go any further, here's Smokey to impart some important barrister-related information he's been researching.
Over the last few episodes, you may have noticed somewhat of a trend occurring, where my segments are concerned at least. Yeah, I know, I haven't exactly been hiding it subtly, but I have grown fascinated with where certain words and phrases actually originate. Mock all you wish, and I'm sure you do, but I bet at least one of you has used some of the knowledge I've brought to the table down the pub with your mates, regaling them with how Scotland Yard got its name, and you have forever cemented your reputation as the most boring in the boozer. This time, however, my interest was piqued elsewhere. Today's film in question, Never Look Back, pretty much plays out as a courtroom drama. At least the latter half of the movie certainly does. And a notion suddenly struck me. What could it be, Smokey, I hear you ask? You lot really are a lovely and inquisitive sort, aren't you? Aww. Could it be the intricacies of defence versus prosecution? The inner workings of jury selections and deliberations? Nope, it's about the stupid wigs. We've all seen them. The faux powdered wigs that every British barrister seems to wear while they do their huffing and puffing and striding about looking all honourable and whatnot. But why wear them in the first place? What purpose could they possibly serve? Well, I did a little digging, and this is straight from the horse's mouth. Not a real horse, you understand, that would be silly. Although if they did make a law drama about a horse barrister, I would definitely tune in. No, this is from a pucker British law site I found, and I just want you to listen to the reasons for the donning of such a ridiculous apparel. Okay, number 1, it brings a sense of formality and solemnity to proceedings. Number 2, by wearing a gown and wig, a barrister represents the rich history of common law and the supremacy of the law over the proceedings. And number 3, wearing a wig allows a visual separation between the law and those before it. Are you kidding me? That's it? Let's just break those down a little, shall we? Formality and solemnity. So, like a funeral. I could wear my black jeans and black jumper, for context I don't own any smart clothes, in court, and I would be absolutely fine to practice law. Next was representing history and law supremacy. Righto, next time in court, and let's face it, there will be a next time, I can cosplay as Henry VIII. He represents history and kinda had law supremacy too. The Church of England didn't always exist, did it? Finally, visual separation between law and those before it. Well, that's just made up. We could all agree now that a fine and exceptionally well-made House of Hammer t-shirt, available from our online store, please check the show notes for details, is now the visual representation of the law, and barristers all over this land could wear them. Again, mock away, but it's no stupider than thinking a wig does that above all else. Oh, and just one other little fact that amused me. The trend to wear wigs in court was begun by Louis XIV of France. And the reason why? To cover a bald spot. Okay, nothing too salacious there, I agree. But in the mid-17th century, a balding scalp was considered a sign that someone had contracted syphilis. Yeah, that's it. They're worn to hide an STD. Another bonus to buying a House of Hammer t-shirt. They don't do that at all. Now, before I leave you, something else that occurred to me while watching Never Look Back was this film was made in 1952. So, having your main female lead as a barrister seems to be quite forward-thinking for the time. Unfortunately, the film does go some way of ruining this good work towards the end of the film, but it's still there nonetheless. So I wanted to find out more about the history of female barristers in this country. How common were they around that time, and how common are they now? Obviously, sadly, the figures turn out to be quite low. Because prior to the Sex Disqualification Removal Act of 1919, women were not permitted to practice law in the UK. By 1931, there were approximately 100 female solicitors. By 2019, 51% of British solicitors were women. So, things are improving, it would seem. Maybe not quickly enough, but they are. The more problematic thing here for me personally is the scant amount of details provided. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but surely this is a subject that more than deserves just a lousy few lines on the internet. Maybe it's me. Maybe a better researcher could find out more. I don't know. Maybe I should just stick to vlogging podcast merch, coming up with quizzes about heavy metal bands that go down like a lead balloon, or giving 9 out of 10 ratings to a film practically everyone else hated. You know what? I think I may have found my niche.
Thanks for that, Smokey. So, Anne, our barrister, has a friend named Nigel, played by Hugh Sinclair, who is also a legal eagle. He would very much like to marry Anne, but she's having none of it, as she feels her career would always come first, and thus she'd make a terrible wife.
Or isn't Casey good enough? Have I got to wait till you're Lord Chief Justice?
No, Nigel, that's just it. You mustn't wait.
Well, there's no one way to stop me, dear. Marry me.
I can't.
Because you don't love me?
Because I do.
Haven't you got that a bit wrong somewhere?
Oh, Nigel, it wouldn't work. I'd make you an awfully bad wife. When I marry, I want to be a wife, not my husband's professional rival.
With Nigel left well and truly hanging, into the picture comes a greasy scoundrel from Anne's past in the form of Guy Ransom, as played by Guy Middleton. His first appearance in the movie sees him skulking in a phone box like a pervert. Speaking of which, here's Kev Moore to tell you all about phone boxes, I mean.
In Never Look Back, Hammer makes full use of the very small Manchester film studio, as well as the now obligatory country house. But there's one setting that's featured quite a few times in this, and it's cropped up at previous pivotal moments, even though it's all but a thing of the past now. The humble British telephone box. I could have said the humble red British telephone box, but that'd be wrong. The colour was chosen to make it easy to find day or night. But in some parts of the country, local councils would simply think they knew best, and they'd want them to blend in with their surroundings. So you could end up with all sorts of varieties, including bogey green that will disappear on a country lane, and black that you'd simply never see at all. The most bizarre request goes to Eastbourne though, where they requested thatched roofs for their first few boxes. Yep, thatched roofs. There were quite a few different shapes and sizes too. The first boxes were introduced in 1921. These looked more like they belonged on a busy Parisian street than East Cheam, and the familiar red boxes would end up having 8 different variations in all, with the last one being introduced in 1965. One of these variants, the K7, never even made it into the streets, but there are 2 surviving examples in the Science and Avoncroft museums. This one was built out of space-age aluminium, which was far lighter than the traditional cast iron, which in itself was even easier to move than the originally proposed concrete boxes. But my particular favourite has to be the K4. As the boxes were owned and maintained by the GPO, the K4 had a machine for dispensing stamps around the back, which, although a great idea, putting it into general circulation was doomed. It's said the noise of the stamp machines disturbed the phone users, and the rolls of stamps in the machines became damp and stuck together in our lovely weather. Though this could be spurious, I like the idea of having a big sticky clump of useless at the back of a telephone box. It's so wonderfully British. When you start looking at the cultural impact of these icons, it's not hard to see why they'd be a returning feature during this phase of Hammer films. As early as 1929, there's one found in Alfred Hitchcock's silent thriller Blackmail. He obviously liked the smell of pee and the sight of some unusual business cards so much that he returned to use one again in Dial M for Murder a quarter of a century later. The box is a pivotal setting for Basil Dearden's 1961 film The Victim, and during the 60s and 70s, probably thanks to the widespread use of colour film, the bright red boxes pop up all over the place, and believe me, once you start spotting them, you can't stop. There's also the classic album Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. This uses one as a visual counterpoint to the glamorous life of rock and roll excess. The decline of the boxes rests mainly at the feet of the mobile phones, and to generations, the outlandishly large device looks alien to the little brick in their pocket. In the 1970s and 80s, as public telephone boxes began to age, sadly, problems with vandalism and a failure to repair damage quickly resulted in the demise of the classic red telephone box, and after the British Telecom takeover in the 80s, it saw the company tearing down the old boxes and putting steel kiosks that looked like a food mixer made by a 4-year-old in their place. Many local authorities used legislation designed to protect buildings of architectural or historic importance to keep old telephone boxes in prominent locations, and around 2,000 of them were given listed status. Under the Adopt a Phone Box scheme, parish councils across the country have come up with some interesting ways to reappropriate them. Although it's stipulated in the contract that they can't use electronic communications apparatus that would compete with BT, this has been the catalyst for many surprising and inventive ways for using these iconic boxes. Often due to the cuts in mobile libraries across the country, over 150 of them are now public book exchanges in villages across the country. On Ben's outraged insistence, these are book exchanges, not libraries. There's not one whiff of the Dewey Decimal System here. There's plant displays, a nightclub that closes at 10 PM in one, the world's smallest art gallery in another, and more than 1,000 red phone boxes have now been repurposed to house defibrillators, which means they continue to potentially save lives to this day. There are less than 8,000 red telephone boxes left in operation today, but they are protected by rules that state that they must be in places of no mobile coverage, accident black spots and so forth. This is a far cry from the 92,000 at the height of its popularity, when a queue outside the call box would be a familiar sight to millions. But they can still be spotted in Malta, Cyprus, Australia and some Caribbean islands like Antigua and Barbados, a symbol of where the British, for good or bad, colonised parts of the world. And of all places, a couple also made it across the pond. With the sale of London Bridge, they are now sitting proudly in Arizona.
Thanks, Kev. So, back to our movie. Guy, the phone box loitering pervert, and Anne used to be a thing, and now he's fallen on hard times and needs a place to stay.
Oh, Guy, no.
What else can I do?
Go to a hotel or friends, anything.
Friends?
That's why I came here tonight, to talk to someone I respect, to remind myself how the other half lived, the half I used to belong to. Well, Anne, you asked for the story. I hope you enjoyed it.
Of course I haven't enjoyed it.
Goodbye, darling. I wish you luck. I expect the next time we meet you'll be Lord Chief Justice.
But, Guy, you can't go like this. Isn't there anything I can do?
Done all you can, letting me cry on your shoulder.
Wait. You can stay here if it'll be any help.
Stay here tonight?
Yes. Then you can decide in the morning what to do about Peggy Hopkins, when you're in better shape to make a decision.
But that's impossible.
Why, this city? I'm sure you've slept on worse.
Well, what about you, Anne? If anybody should find out that I've stayed?
No one else's business.
People have a nasty habit of making it their business, and it wouldn't help your career.
We can forget my career for once.
After spending the night on the sofa, Guy finds himself as chief suspect for a murder that occurred that previous evening. With Anne's professional reputation on the line, Guy refuses to admit that he stayed with her. When he's arrested and charged with murder, the question is how far will Anne go to risk both her personal and professional reputation for this returning mystery man from her past?
Nigel, I didn't know you were back.
Anne, you've got to drop this brief.
What brief?
The ransom case.
Oh, why?
Now, I assure you there's nothing personal in this. But when exactly did you agree to accept it?
I don't remember exactly. When it became plain he was going to be charged.
Was it by any chance the morning that woman died?
Why do you ask that?
Ransom came to see you, didn't he? He must have done.
Whether he did or not, I hardly think it concerns you.
Anne, I'm telling you again, you must withdraw from the case.
Is that all you came here to say? Because I have rather a lot of work to do.
I have a very good reason for asking this. Did you decide to handle the defense from personal motives?
I'm afraid I can't discuss it.
Ransom took a villa in Portofino, didn't he? Do you want me to go on? Oh, Anne, you're being so foolish. Do you realize that you're violating the code that governs the relation between counsel and client? And do you realize something else? That if one word of this came out in court, your career would be finished. Oh, darling, I beg of you, give it up while there's time.
And so, we head over to the round table. I must warn you, the nature of this film means discussing it reveals spoilers. So if you've not seen it and you'd like to do so before continuing, pause us here and come back to us later. For everyone else, here's Kev and Smokey, and me, offering our thoughts on Never Look Back.
Never Look Back then, gents. A different kind of horror film, and one we've not seen so far. A courtroom drama that starts with a metal pedal horse race.
That's how every film should start.
I want one, and I think that should be what we in the next sort of House of Hammer meetup. We need to have a small horse race across a pub floor.
A metal pedal horse race. I had one of them, when I was a kid, up till I was about 15.
Oh, well, you've been installed as a sort of 2-to-1 favourite then, Kev, with your previous experience.
You should have seen me ride it. Definitely not a 2-to-1 favourite.
I've no desire to see you ride that ever.
Yeah, that child's got issues.
It's Smokey's got issues. No. Yeah, you say a different kind of Hammer film. Is it really?
It's very linear. It's the most linear Hammer film we've watched, and boy oh boy have we watched some linear films. But this one, there's no side plots. It doesn't go off on any tangents. It's like a bullet train that moves quite slowly.
So some might say that there's no side plots. There's no fleshing out. There's no story here.
I think that's a bit harsh. There's a story. I don't think it fulfills. No, I think there's a story. I just think it's flat. It's linear. It doesn't surprise. It's very predictable, and it's thoroughly sort of unsatisfying. Next.
Right. I've got to put this out. There's a fundamental problem with this film right from the off, right? Is that, as you said, there are no surprises with it at all. So you know where it's going to go and you know how it's going to end as well. If the film...
More or less, yeah. I'll give you that, yeah.
Yeah, so if the film had had a massive twist at the end, okay, fair enough. I might have gone, all right.
Which I was expecting.
Yes.
To be
I was
fair,
expecting Jagged Edge.
yeah, it's a courtroom. It's a courtroom drama.
Yeah.
You know, we've all seen the thing with Edward Norton that I can't remember the title of, where we were.
Fight Club.
Primal
No,
Fear.
not that one. Hulk, not that one. Primal Fear, yes, Primal Fear. Where where you're all expecting a twist of some notion, but as you say, Smokes, there isn't one.
No. So anyway, going back to my problem, which is the fact that this story makes no sense. So you have this very successful female barrister, and the whole film starts with jubilation and celebration about her big day, her big moment, only for it to be brought crashing down by a complete weasel-faced knob. And then it also you've got
Esquire.
But that's
weasel-faced knob Esquire.
But that's it, though. That's it, right? You start off going, well done to her. She's doing really well for herself. And then it's just sort of like, oh, well, then that didn't last very long, did it?
We think another strong female character, Hammer, are putting at the forefront of a film. First half of the film,
that.
You think it's a High Hazel, it's another, here's a heroine we can get behind, and boy, oh boy, do they whip the rug out from under her feet and our feet.
Very quickly.
Yes.
Well, there's only High Hazel that could have pulled off that dress. Otherwise, the opening dress where she looks like she's a crash with Interflora, that's fantastic.
My wife did say, what on earth is keeping that dress up? As well. Where is the support? How is this? It's anti-gravity, that dress, surely. Yes.
Well, actually, Ben, right, here's a handy inside hint for you, right? I was looking at behind the scenes at how they recorded this, and
it sounds like it's been a thoroughly difficult job for you, this, Kev. Yeah, carry on.
All the sets were actually turned upside down, and they were filmed upside down just to turn it back round afterwards. That's movie magic.
It's like Nightmare on Elm Street.
Like Inception, I was thinking, yes, brilliant.
Right, we should, give the actress a little bit of credit. Rosamund John, playing the main part, and I thought she did handle it very well.
It's her only one.
To be
only Hammer.
Yeah,
to be fair though,
really well.
To be fair though, I did not stop thinking that High Hazel would have been so much better in this role though.
Too comedic,
all the way through.
I think would have been the issue. I think Rosamund John was not the problem with this film.
No, definitely not.
I think she played the part exactly as it needed to be played. The problem was, and I'm going to get straight to my major point,
please,
is that the men around her are so horribly miscast and so horribly unlikable that it just makes you have absolutely no sympathy for her or them or anything. So her boyfriend, who is played by Hugh Sinclair, who is Nigel, is in real life 10 years older than her, which I don't have a problem with. But looks 20 years older than her, which I do have a problem with. And also, they look an implausible couple, and there's very little chemistry between them. Bring in the third guy, or the third part of this trifecta of weirdness, who is the guy from her past,
the trifecta of weakness,
who is literally a guy called Guy both in terms of the actor and the character. Yeah. And he's 44 years old, so he's about 5 or 6 years older. Again, looks about 15 years older, and also just looks like a creepy uncle, and acts like a creepy uncle, and gives you absolutely no reason as a viewer to think, yeah, I can understand why maybe 10 years ago these two were in love, because he's awful. And I don't just mean awful as in a villain, I mean awful as in, like, a human being. As in a person who has no charm, no charisma, no reason that you think. What they needed here was a sleazy, charming villain, someone who could weasel his way into any woman's life by being
like the one from Man-Bait.
Yeah, exactly. By being handsome and being devious. This is just he's just a douche. And the first time you see him, you think, "Oh God, not that weasel-faced douche." And then I didn't change my mind throughout the whole film.
Well, one of my notes was the fact that if she's some sort of amazing judge of character so much that she's actually a QC, then why does she seem to pick these really creepy, controlling blokes?
Yeah.
Because Nigel plays the heartstrings card pretty quickly, when he says something like, if you don't want to tell me, then don't tell me, or blah, 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 and he's like, oh, God, whatever.
I can't explain, but something's happened that makes it impossible for me to leave London.
Well, I'd love to know what can happen between midnight and 9:30 to make it impossible.
Someone needs my help someone I can't refuse.
Meaning you can't refuse me.
Oh, do try and understand.
For heaven's sake, don't ask me to understand. I don't. If you don't want to tell me, that's that.
Then you've also got Guy as well that has some sort of really bizarre control over her. And I just can't work out what he's got on her, apart from Polaroids, that's keeping her from, because she is basically committing complete career suicide.
Yep. And there's no need for it at all. Because as you said, if you're just a human louse and you have no charisma like Guy appears to have, at least, because he's not an onion. There are no layers to peel there. He's just a dick.
He's a cad.
So, yeah, he is. Exactly, yeah.
A bounder.
All right, fair dues. I'll give you that, but I'm not saying it. And so for her to sort of turn around, okay, fine, if she's thinking about some long-lost holiday that they once had years ago, all right, fine. But, all right, it's the lesser of two evils, but Nigel is the way to go between the two of them.
The whole plot of this hinges on the fact that, she's unwilling, Anne is unwilling to marry Nigel because she's dedicated to her career. She doesn't think she'll make a very good wife. She doesn't want the conflict between her professional life and what would be her home life, given that he's involved in the same career. So it makes absolutely no sense that she's willing to sacrifice this professionalism, this career, for someone who's wandered into her life out of the past, who she owes nothing to, or does she? Who knows? We never get that explained to us, and that is massively to the film's detriment. And the fact that you can't then get behind her as a heroine, because you think, well, we need to know as an audience why you're sacrificing this career that you seemingly won't sacrifice for this. Yes, all right, this guy he looks a bit too old for you, you've got no chemistry with him, but he still seems a nice guy, but you're not giving him the time of day, even though he's clearly besotted with you. But you will give Weaselface McCad the time of day, even though he's not, even though he's clearly awful, and therefore, I'm afraid you've lost my sympathy from scene one onwards.
Yeah. I mean, but that's it, right, though. So even, again, another point, a fundamental problem is they go into this court case. She's a barrister. She's defending him. She's lying from the very beginning. So again, all my sympathy's gone out the window from the beginning of the film, where I was sort of like, as I said, okay, oh great, fair play on her. It's got to be really hard to be a female barrister in the 50s, and then to just suddenly just throw it all away for this pillock. It's just sort of like, well, I don't care about any of you. I want Guy to die. I don't want her to be successful because she's just been stupid. And then Nigel's just a ponce. And so it's just sort of like, I don't care about any of you people. But what it really boils down to, right? You said at the start in your intro there, Kev, that this is something a little different, right? It's not, right? After what we watched in the last episode, when it came to Wigs of Danger, okay?
Wigs of Danger? That's this film, isn't it?
Wigs of Danger. Oh, nicely done, my friend. Well done. I love that. Wigs of Danger. Hashtag Wigs of Danger. Is the fact that I'm getting jaded now, especially after the last film and then into this one, of Hammer just churning out crap. And okay, they may be teetering between a 3, a 4, and a 5 and a 6, but it's just like, oh, come on, we're back to that stage, lads. We're back to needing an 8, 9, and a 10. We haven't had one in so long.
Right. Well, picking you up on that then,
please.
Do you think it's possibly because they're not at home anymore?
Yeah,
sure.
This is
absolutely.
shot in Manchester studios. They're basically making films on the hoof wherever they can.
I'm sure that's a reason. But, we're doing it 70 years later and going through them one by one. We need something else.
What I would say about that is, Kev, I was reading that they recreated effectively the Old Bailey in those Manchester studios, didn't they? And I would say that looks pretty good. And I'd also say that the courtroom scenes are definitely the best bits of it. And that bit as a melodrama is actually quite gripping, because you've got point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, little twist here, little. We said it was a film without a twist, but there are little twists in the court story that make that standalone sort of 20, 25 minutes is actually quite compelling. Perhaps the better choice would have been to make that the whole film, or at least the proper culmination of the film, rather than having, there's a little sort of add-on bit at the end, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
I mean, Kev,
Culmination.
What did you think, Kev, of the whole courtroom bit?
The courtroom bit for me was definitely the highlight of the whole film. But as well as that, you can't talk about the courtroom bit without talking about the surprise witnesses. Now, there's 3, and it kind of goes in all sorts of crazy directions straight away, doesn't it? Because you've got a couple of notable ones start with prototype Danny LaRue, and then a night watchman that sleeps.
Yeah.
And then you've got Molly Wheeler. It's like, what?
I've got to say that though, the 2 best bits of those courtroom scenes, and one is the judge himself. I like him because he's just so bewildered by the outside world that
he doesn't know who Marlene Dietrich is for a start off.
Didn't at all, and so that made for quite fun viewing. But as you
best judge since Ghostbusters 2.
It's yeah, all right. I'm not going to disagree with that. But no, but as you mentioned, this sort of what was his name, Mr. Vaughan, who was kind of like, he seemed to be some kind of cabaret, possibly drag act, and
darling, he is the show.
Do you know what? Yeah. I'm not going to disagree with that at all, because he really, really was, and he put his heart and soul into that performance as well. Yeah. He was the best actor there.
He had a great suit as well. Wow,
didn't he?
That guy was special.
That pinstripe
he was spectacular.
Yeah,
I liked that.
Yeah, he was fabulous. But these moments, lads, they're few and far between. They're too few and far between in a 73-minute movie. You know? And
yeah, it's 38 minutes before we actually get to the court as well, because
exactly.
there's a lot of preamble in this.
Far too long. There's far too long staring at the doll she got from Italy or wherever the hell it was. Yeah, there's far too much of listening to the piano play, and it was just sort of like, oh, come on.
It's Little Figaro, I'll have you know.
Figaro, thank you. I forgot the name.
For a second, I thought you said fig roll.
Little fella. I tell you, Kev, I love a fig roll. Not going to argue there.
You look at them just as wistfully.
Too right, yeah. Memories.
Did anybody else think that all the action took place at 12 Lebanon Studios? Because that's all I could hear as far as the address was mentioned. Every time they mentioned it, I don't know about you, but I had real problems with the sound on this print.
Yeah, it was bad.
Which I'll probably talk about a bit.
It's one of the worst prints we've seen in a while.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that probably detracts a bit to your enjoyment?
I think that's an important consideration, because when I started watching this, that was in the forefront of my mind was, the first 3 or 4 minutes, I thought, am I going to be able to actually sit and watch this all the way through comfortably?
Yeah.
And you do get into it, but the film was jumpy, the sound was all over the place. I am in my final rating, I am taking that into consideration, because I think if we'd seen, I know it's not going to happen, if we'd seen a HD crisp audio cut of this, I honestly think we would have been more sympathetic to it.
Maybe.
Because I think a little bit, I'm not defending it to the nth degree, but a little bit of the nuance gets lost when you miss a little bit of it, and the visuals are a bit jumpy. So in answer to your question, Kev, I do think that's an important consideration, because this was, I think, since Sporting Love, this is the worst cut of a film I've seen.
I think definitely. You're right. Yeah. The Dark Road wasn't fantastic either, but I think you're probably right. I think this is the worst print.
The Dark Road was spectacular.
I meant the print. You knew I did. Yeah. But no, I think you're right. Yeah, it was bad quality. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, the intro, that opening 4 or 5 minutes, when they're going into the club, when they're talking to the maitre d', they get in, they're talking about getting married, and then they're dancing. It was very muddy and very, very blocky. I would like to point out, by the way, he is my spirit animal when it comes to dancing, because having 2 left feet, I sympathise with that man, because he just couldn't do it, and neither could I, so I sympathised.
He was having to dance and talk.
I know. Well, I can do one or the other. In fact, I can't do either. So,
but how are you when it comes to riding a little horse, though? That's what everyone wants to do.
Demon.
So, second favourite Smokey in the Donkey Derby of the House of Hammer. Then I'm saying clearly the sad Ken of this affair. He's 100 to 1, but he's bound to come in.
Please don't say Smokey in the Donkey Derby again. I'm not quite sure I like that.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
I'll try and get this back in a bit, but let's see. I'll throw this one out then as a thought. Is it normal for police to question a suspect on a murder scene, while a body's still there, still chilling down?
It wasn't Dexter or CSI, was it? That's for certain. I thought it was. This was. They do give the would-be murderer quite a lot of leeway to talk his way out of it at the scene of the crime when he can see all the evidence in front of him.
Yeah. And if he is actually supposed to be the boyfriend of the murder victim, then surely he'd be a little bit more upset.
Mm-hmm.
True.
This isn't the biggest problem with this film.
But what about Guy's alibi, which is, I must have dropped off to sleep because the next thing I knew, it was morning. I looked at my watch and it said nearly 7:30 in the morning. Is this really such an insane statement for defence? Because the lawyers were just like, oh, no, he's definitely going to be a killer. You know, it was just really bizarre behaviour.
They treat it as a really preposterous idea, and it's not.
So
I've been to the moon.
What you two are trying to say is it's both happened to you. You've both been out, fallen asleep on a park bench, and all of a sudden, balamo, sunrise, is what you're saying.
I don't think the location matters. I think
it hasn't happened to you.
I think if he'd said, well, this is true. I'm sure Ben, Mr. Clean Living Ben there, probably hasn't happened to him.
No, but I've not fallen asleep outside and woke up and it's tomorrow. I have to admit.
Recycling bins. Cardboard recycling bins for industrial...
Kev, it's a pro tip from inside the game. From Kev here.
They're warm.
to be fair, Kev, I wouldn't want to do that in Middlesbrough either, so I don't blame him. So it's fine.
No, we eat the cardboard here, so there's nothing.
It's called a Parmo.
A cardo.
But nice. But no, I have to agree. I mean, they treat it as though it's the most ludicrous alibi that's ever been presented, and all it is just a guy falling asleep and waking up the next day. And so that was odd. It was a weird way to take it.
He'd be frozen.
Now, beer coat, mate. You got your beer coat on. You can just sleep anywhere. 36 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's true. He had been at a party all night drinking, so. You know,
but it rained and he wasn't wet. Remember that? That was another thing.
Oh well, that's a difference of opinion to everybody else then, because I thought he was a real big wet,
a real drip, a big drip. Kev.
Yes,
as Kev will be telling us, or may have told us, is that there were phone boxes everywhere. Then he could have just stayed in one of them and stayed.
But he didn't say that though. He didn't say I went in a phone box. He said I laid on a park bench and fell asleep in the rain and that.
He jumped a massive ravine.
I'm just trying to help.
Yes, I know what you mean. But it's almost like neither his alibi is watertight, nor his sort of conviction is watertight. So yes,
exactly.
Hence the reason we end up in courtroom peril.
Yeah, which is all because of Molly. When she turns up and. You know, then he ends up having to scream, "You've got to tell them, and you've got to tell them." Yeah, and then later on he says, "She can't desert me now. I won't let her."
Yeah,
and it's all kind of spiraling really out of control by then, you know, and Anne has to actually come clean and say, "All right, Gov, I was perjuring myself."
Did anyone else get flashes of A Fish Called Wanda in this with George Thomason and Jamie Lee Curtis? And she's there and she just goes, "Oh, yeah, well, I remembered the time because I looked and it was 12:20. And I went, where's he walking with that sawn-off shotgun?" And he just goes insane. I just got flashes of A Fish Called Wanda in this.
Maybe they were inspired by this.
I hope so. I hope John Cleese was inspired by this.
I doubt it, is all I'm saying.
I very much doubt it as well. But the thing is, right, is we're talking about the sort of the climactic scenes in the courthouse being the best bit of the film. Okay, yes, that's true. However, that's not a high mark for this film.
No.
Okay? You know, this isn't, you know, if someone is going to watch this for the first time and they're hearing us and they're going, "Oh, great, well, I'll wait till the courtroom scenes and this suddenly is going to get really, really good." No. Drop your expectations down on this one. I know you were saying, Ben, that you know you were playing it a little bit coy when it came to your ratings and your reviews of this, but this is not a good film.
Well, look, I'll be honest. I was pretty gripped by the first half an hour. Yes, it's a very slow burn. Yes, it's very linear. Yes, not a great deal in inverted commas happens. But I knew it was going to end up in court, and I was thinking, okay. You know, you're presented with a scenario, and I'll recap here, where you've got a woman who doesn't want to give up her profession. She's a barrister. Her boyfriend is a barrister who basically it's sort of foreshadowed that they may end up against each other in court. Then this mysterious guy ends up coming out of her past. We don't know what he's done. We don't know the relationship he's had with her. We don't know what he's done, but he's done something. He's accused of murder. She chooses to defend him. She ends up against the boyfriend. It all goes to court. I'm thinking, wow. This is where I turned the inside sort of knowledge. This is where I turned it off and went to bed and came back to it the next day. I went to bed thinking, this is pretty good, this. I'm pretty enjoying this. All goes downhill from that point onwards. The courtroom scene, as I said, you're watching it thinking, oh, this is pretty gripping. This is okay, twos and fro's, there's a point and counterpoint. Unfortunately, it's at, as you said, the revelation, the witness comes in and says, I saw this man leave the house that he's accused of murder of. When a gunshot went off, he must be guilty. He says, basically, I'm not guilty, I was staying with my former girlfriend, the barrister. She's forced to give up defending him, and then to come out and be a witness for him. And yeah, I accept I'm spoiling this for everybody, but I'm afraid that's just the way it is.
Cares.
We're going to live with it. And it's then the 10 minutes after that whip the rug from underneath you in the worst possible way, because they don't do it in a twist to the plot type way. They do it in I thought well of all these characters, or basically this one character, and all of a sudden, what Hammer have done and what the filmmakers have done to sort of undermine what could have been an excellent character is deeply unsatisfying. Deeply unsatisfying.
Yeah, yes.
And also reasonably nonsensical. Because there's a tremendous fist fight to the end, which we can talk about in a moment.
Beautiful.
But it's a fist fight that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It's a fist fight between the would-be killer, who, let's again, further spoilers, gets off with the charge, and the prosecutor who fails to prosecute him, who knows he's guilty really, but can't prosecute him, so they just have a bit of a fight.
Yeah.
And a gun is produced. Where did that gun come from? Did he just get that back?
Down his pants.
Did he just pick it up at the crime scene or something?
This is 1950s Britain, Kevin. It's practically America.
Everybody's got 3 guns down the socks.
Yeah. I've got to say, your description there, Ben, of the film before you went to bed and continued it the next day sounded like a great movie.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It really did. It had all the ingredients of such a great film. It had intrigue, and it was just sort of like, oh my God, how's she going to get out of this? And then it was just sort of like, I'll just throw a damp squib at it instead.
Yes, it was. It's pathetic. I mean, I did enjoy the fight, and I mean, there is some proper,
The fight's brilliant.
There's some proper punches thrown. There's a lovely right cross into a. As a librarian, I shouldn't appreciate this, but into a bookcase that then collapses, and all of like the old Hansard laws or whatever that's behind him come flooding down, and you just think, yes, I could enjoy that. It's a flimsy bookcase, so they needed a couple more roll plugs in that. Is all I'd say. But no, it's terrific.
Best bit of the film.
So the surprise fight at the end, then, did it actually fix anything?
No,
because
no.
He's kind of still left in the air, and something is said.
A point of saying I can't be convicted again because of the double jeopardy law. So basically, I've got out with it. So it doesn't matter how much you punch me, I'm not going to be found guilty of murder. And he says,
doesn't stop him from trying.
I'm going to punch you a few more times anyway.
As you said, that sort of right uppercut that he gives to him was a thing of beauty. It belonged in Rocky. It was beautiful.
But the thing is, we get nothing because Nigel actually says something, but again, we're back to the poor audio quality, and it is probably something that does kind of damn him, if you like. Guy would be sent down for this. But unfortunately, he says it so fast and the sound quality is so low that we can't actually tell what he's got him on.
I just think it's dirt.
It's just, I think it is just, we've got to take it as this. It is just alluding to the fact that obviously this guy's had a really, really sketchy past, and because he's been looking into him because of this case, he's found it out a little bit more. And so that's fair dues. But it's, again, that's an unsatisfying way of doing it.
He did say that he's got dirt on him that is found under a few stones.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah.
But again, that's not good enough.
It would have been nice if we'd have seen that, perhaps. Well, right, we might as well get on to his summing up, because I'm going to go straight into this, because, it might have been better if it had been more like a Columbo, where you'd have actually seen guy
Yeah,
up to
agreed.
up to his nonsense at the beginning, and you actually do see what goes off, because as it is, it's very unsatisfactory because you don't actually see any kill.
Yeah.
You only see a corpse, but
Yeah.
you don't actually see a corpse actually there. You just see something under a white cover at the crime scene.
And the corpse of a character that we've not even seen. So doubly disappointing.
We've never seen.
Yeah. I say make this a 1 hour Midsummer Murders, or you make it a 40-minute episode drama where you can flesh it out a little bit more. You forgive me, you show the dead body, you show the reasoning behind it, and move on.
Oh my God, I've just got a great idea. This could be like a MCU thing where you get a Columbo episode 1, and then the second episode is an episode of Crown Court from the 1970s.
There you go. And then throw in Bergerac there just for fun.
For the fist fight?
Yeah.
For me, it's a really low scorer. I can't even figure out what it is yet, so I'm hoping that you're going to be able to illuminate it. Smokey, what do you reckon?
I don't think I can go any higher than a 4. There were some decent acting performances in there, but they're weighted down by a script that it's just poor. As you say, maybe it would have been a little bit higher if it looked better. Don't know what the original product was. If there is a cut out there that we haven't seen, I'd be more than happy to give it another view to see if it makes a difference. But just unfortunately, the story is silly. It makes no sense. As I said at the beginning, I didn't give a crap about any of these people because they're all making such bad decisions, or as Ben so correctly said, they're just a complete douchebag. And so I can't go any higher than a 4. I'm sorry. No, this is poor. One of the worst we've seen in quite a while.
Ben?
I wanted to like this more than I did. I think I've
definitely.
I've given it as much praise as I can, but I don't disagree with anything that Smokey has said. I thought it was miscast. It didn't give you anything to latch onto as a viewer in terms of empathy. I did think it was an intriguing watch in terms of the narrative, linear up until the final 20% of the film. That's not enough to save it in its own right. You've got to have empathy with people in a story like this, and when you don't, it's definitely to the film's detriment. I give it a 5. With a couple of tweaks, I could have given it a 7.
Yeah.
I would watch it. I would, for a film I've rated that low, I would watch it again, though, because there is a lot to enjoy, despite the fact there's a lot to not like. More so than some of the things we've watched. I can take the positives of the negatives, but I can't rate it higher than a 5 as much as I might want to, because that's just what it is. It's deeply flawed.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on board with Ben. I was thinking around 5, but the more I've thought about it, I mean, I'm giving it an extra point anyway for Willie's Tash, which we've not noticed. We've not actually discussed.
you Tash whore.
Willie's Tash is something to behold. Yes. Do you want to briefly explain to the listener who Willie is?
Willie is a sub-character that we see at the metal horse racing at the beginning and never see again.
Yes,
But he's got a tash that makes him look like Slowpoke Rodriguez or something like that. It's bizarre.
He's the plummiest Englishman ever, by the way.
He's got no chin. He's amazing. He's got no chin at all. He's got neck.
He's all
neck
tash.
And then tash.
All tash, no chin.
Yeah. George Lucas's dad.
So you're going for a 5, are you, Kev?
I'm going for a 5, just for the fisticuffs, Willie's Tash, the strange cast of witnesses that do actually make it quite enjoyable, and they really do pepper it nicely. And it does look good. There are some really good sets in this.
Yeah, it does look good.
The court's good.
Yeah, it's crap.
I noticed this is one thing that I really hate about this particular period in Hammer films, because a lot of it is static shots. You've got a lot of them where, like, you'll get two characters in a room talking at each other, and the camera is locked off, just one shot with them both in it, shouting at each other. Boring. But in this, you've actually got camera movement, and it's only subtle, but Francis Searle is actually trying his best to make most of what he's got, and there's only maybe 3 sets in a phone box, which you've mentioned earlier, and he manages to make it quite visually interesting.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there is a shot in this that's very reminiscent to Room to Let. I don't know if you remember that with when we had Valentine Dial and we had the camera moving and the mirror shot in that as well.
Yeah.
There is one very similar to that in this, where Nigel and Anne are talking to each other basically through the mirror, which was really kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then actually not long after that, there is a shot between Anne and Guy, and they both sit on the sofa, and instead of being in front of them looking at their faces, the camera is behind them, and so you just occasionally catch a glimpse of their profile while they're talking to each other. And obviously he's his way through his entire life story while she's pretending to care. But I've got to admit, beautiful shot. Yeah, I'll give it that.
The other thing to note as well that I read in the notes was about the how difficult the courtroom scenes were to shoot because of the eye lines. But they'd hired...
It's also high up, isn't it?
Yeah, they'd hired one of the best continuity
Mm.
sort of assistants that they had to make sure that everything was consistent. And I think that really worked because you really did feel it. I would never have guessed that was a set, not a courtroom, which was definitely to the film's credit. So it's nice that we can kind of end on some positives.
There are some positives. I mean, that shot in particular that you're talking about, or the several shots that you're talking about there, it's the gallery of a court, isn't it? It's where the riffraff will sit and they look down on it, and that's where we are watching this. It's just a shame that the drama wasn't more for us.
Yeah,
watching plebs,
always in the cheap seats.
Oh yes, proud of it.
So there you have it, a so-so rating for our courtroom drama. As you'll have picked up on, the dramatic crux of the movie, and we all love a dramatic crux, relied on the witnesses paraded through the court. So I thought, before we leave you for this episode, I could go into a little more detail about the types of witnesses who testify. The first type of witness is the eyewitness, also known as the common witness, lay witness, or ordinary witness. This type of witness is what most people would think of when they hear the word. It's someone who's observed certain events and describes what they saw. Another type of witness is a character witness. They can testify on behalf of another person as to that person's positive or negative character traits or that person's reputation in the community. Say, for example, one of my House of Hammer co-hosts was accused of a crime. As a good friend of both, I may be called upon to stand in court and explain what type of bloke they are. The judge would then obviously be reaching for the black cat before you could say, "I've no idea how that chainsaw got there, or where my trousers went, my lord." There's also the fact witness. They might not have actually seen anything happen or even know the accused or victim, but they can report or recount pertinent facts that they've experienced, which may relate to the case. And yet another type of witness is the expert witness. This can be anyone with knowledge or experience of a particular field or discipline beyond that to be expected of a layman. These can be many and varied, and they include medical experts. This could include doctors, nurse practitioners, physical therapists, or any other medically trained professional. They may testify in certain criminal cases to shed light on the nature and extent of injury sustained by a victim of a criminal assault, saying things like, "Yes, my lord, we can see through the entry and exit wounds that this chap has been run through with a sword cane." A vocational expert is someone who understands the nature of a particular role and can lend an expert view as to what the role involves and what skills or abilities someone might need to undertake it, like a librarian or a skunk handler. Engineering experts are someone who can judge whether something has been designed or manufactured safely. Everything from cases involving collapsed bridges to a malfunctioning robot lawnmower that ate your guinea pig. As for forensic experts, well, we're all likely familiar with this type of expert from TV and the movies, where, say, DNA was found on a critical piece of evidence at a crime scene. Or perhaps a white powdery substance has been found in a defendant's car and is tested for cocaine or methamphetamine or anidin ultra. And mental health experts. There could be a variety of situations where the mental health of someone involved in a case would come into question. Was someone of sound mind when they changed their will? Was someone criminally insane at the time they got involved with this podcast? Committed a criminal act? Such questions can be answered by mental health experts who will evaluate the individual and offer an opinion. But let's bring this conversation back to the movies. When I think of expert witnesses involved in criminal cases on the big screen, my mind goes straight to those classic courtroom dramas. That's right, I'm talking Tango and Cash, specifically that little dweeb fella who acts as an expert audiology witness after faking a recording of our heroes killing someone. Also a second mention in this episode for Ghostbusters 2, where the street-digging dude accuses Pete Venkman and all of having put slime in the old pneumatic transit system themselves. And also, who could forget, finally, that scene in the modern-day classic Con Air, where our hero gets sent to prison for no less than 7 to 10 years for having used his deadly self-defense skills. There's no witnesses in that scene, but I had to shoehorn Mr. Cage in somehow. And with that, I think we're almost done here. But before we go, just a reminder to give us a rating on your podcaster of choice. A good rating, obviously. And remember, you can follow us on the socials on Twitter and Instagram at HouseHammerPod. Also, should you wish to send us feedback, comments, complaints, compliments, or dirty limericks, you can email them to scream@houseofhammerpodcast.com. Should you wish to adorn yourself from head to toe in House of Hammer podcast merchandise, simply head over to the URL that I'm not reading out, but it's in the show notes. And finally, should you want more of the House of Hammer, and frankly, who would not, you can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/househammerpod. There's a fair chunk of extra content on there already, so you'll be able to get stuck right in hearing about Kev's love of horror, Ben's love of Whitby, the state of Britain in 1952, numerous other bits of content, and many quizzes where Smokey probably cheats. Subscribe now to get all of this and more content each and every month, as well as exclusive perks and benefits. Remember, every single penny we receive edges us closer to our dream of extracting jade from the mountains in a custom-made plane. Right then, I think that's it. So until next time, it's goodbye from me, Ben Taylorson.
From me, Smokey.
And from me, Kev Moore.
We look forward to seeing you next time at the door of the House of Hammer, where beauty is very definitely only skin deep in stolen face. Ta-ra!